Hi, welcome to Culturally Determined. I'm your host, Aryeh Cohen-Wade, and my guest today is Erin Schwartz. Erin, could you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Erin Schwartz. I am a writer, and I've written for The Nation, which I think is what we're talking about today. Two pieces one about Fleabag, the TV show, and the other one about The Sopranos.
Right. So I saw your Fleabag piece first and thought it was interesting, and I had wanted to talk about Fleabag on this platform because I like the show a lot and lots of interesting things. And I saw you also wrote about Sopranos. In particular, the angle you wrote about was Sopranos in New Jersey. And because you grew up in New Jersey, and I also grew up in New Jersey, and maybe we only grew up about 20 miles from each other. Which
is amazing. It's like a garbage state, but it's like a garbage state in some of the most like interesting, like elaborate ways in the world, and like no one gives it enough credit.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. We'll talk all about New Jersey and whether it deserves it deserves to be known as the armpit of America or not. But first, Fleabag. Okay. So. How would you describe this show for someone who hasn't even heard of it? Although it's been talked about so much in the past 6 months or so that I feel like most people have heard of it by now, but in case you haven't, how would you describe it?
Yeah, when I'm working on a piece, I'll turn on like a Google News alert in case something like an interview comes up and there's more information about it, and I just like turn the Fleabag one off because everyone was just like coming up with like listicles about Fleabag, like where to buy the Fleabag jumpsuit, and it was like almost too much information about it. This is a good question, though, because I did just convince my dad to watch Fleabag, and I did have to kind of sell it to him. So it's a really funny, dark story told entirely from the perspective of its main character, who doesn't have a name. Her name is Fleabag in the credits, and it came out of a one-woman show created by Phoebe Waller-Bridge, I think in 2013. And you're just like going with her throughout her life. It's really, there are a lot of moments that are like really hilarious and really depressing, but you watch her, she's like pretty much adrift in all of her central relationships. Like her relationship with her family is pretty non-existent. Her best friend has just died. And she is just like trying to keep herself together when all of these like rough things have happened to her.
Right, and so it's a British show. The first series, as they say over there, came out a couple years ago, and then the second one came out this year. And it seems like there are only 6 episodes per series, like in the original Office or something. And it seems like they ended on a stopping point at the end of the second series, which you think, okay, this is probably it. And it's like a complete work.
Yeah, and she said like a bunch of times that she's not going to do a third. So
maybe there'll be a Christmas special, as they do sometimes over there. Nice. And the other thing is, I think you can only watch it on Amazon Prime in America unless you have some like illegal means of obtaining things. Like I think it aired on BBC or something over there, but Amazon Prime has it here.
Yeah, Amazon Prime is how I've been watching it. There are also absolutely illegal ways to watch any TV show.
Right. Okay, so and Phoebe Waller-Bridge also is the creator or writer of oh god, I just went out of my head, the show with Sandra Oh.
Killing Eve. Yeah. It's based on a book, but she's the writer for the first season of Killing Eve, which is also an incredible show.
Right, and I think she created Fleabag, stars in it. I think she wrote every episode. Did she also direct every episode?
I think so.
Okay, so this is like it's like an auteur production basically around Phoebe Waller-Bridge, and she's like so she's the core of the show. She's basically in every scene because either
she's in literally every scene.
Okay, yeah, that would make sense because we're always experiencing reality through her perspective, and we can see flashbacks that she's thinking about. And the other, this is not like a unique narrative trick, is that she breaks the fourth wall and talks directly to the camera and the viewer. And this is established very early on that she does this. No one else can hear her, asterisk by that. No one else, asterisk, can hear her. And she creates this, like, sense of intimacy with the viewer of, we're getting to see, her running commentary, making fun of the awful people she's surrounded by, what she really thinks is going to happen. As you know, sometimes she predicts something that's going to happen, and then the opposite happens, so she's not always right.
Yeah.
And, she's a very flawed character in numerous ways, in how she lives her life, and how she treated her friends, and so forth, but we still, feel this connection with her. I think it was mostly due to Phoebe Waller-Bridge being, this, charismatic, kind of captivating actor on screen, but also the fact that she's talking directly to us. Okay, so, and the angle you took a little bit on this was thinking about the narrative devices and how, in some ways, this is, even though this is not like a show about the internet, the ways that, you don't really see them using computers at all, though. There's the part where she,
sexting scene.
Right, there's a part where she, is watching Obama give a speech and masturbates to it in a very funny scene that you're watching on her computer. But kind of direct, I mean, both of us right now are directly addressing, the camera.
On a webcam.
Right, so this is a new paradigm. Okay, so I talked for a while. Why don't you say whatever you want in response to that?
Well, I think it, as you mentioned, it is not the first time someone in film or TV has, broken the fourth wall and addressed the viewer directly. But I think there's something unique and, it feels very contemporary about the fact that she is explicitly trying to charm you. She kind of wins you over to her side, and that she also is sometimes wrong. So she's not an omniscient narrator. She's not, always right. And she doesn't necessarily kind of control the flow of information in the narrative. Sometimes someone else, another character will say something and she hasn't really told us, the viewer, about it yet. And she kind of doesn't want to let it in, but she has to. So she's not, even though she's the one who's telling us about stuff, she doesn't have control over reality. It's not her reality. It's a reality narrated by her. And also the fact that other characters sometimes differ from what she expects of them. And then, as you alluded to with the asterisk, in the second season, the priest starts noticing when she's she's talking to the audience. He can't hear her. He doesn't know what she's saying, but he notices that something's different. The way he describes it, he's you went somewhere else. And then she kind of stops, it causes a bit of a rift in their relationship, that she no longer has this kind of place. She can, I don't know, I think about it like an outlet. She is, the series starts, the first season starts when she has lost her best friend, who she could share all of these kind of mordant, cynical observations with, and she just doesn't have anyone who she can talk to, so she's talking to us. And then once she starts getting kind of once that's perceived, she has to kind of adjust. And in the second moment where the priest notices that she's talking with someone else, he's asking her all these questions about her mother's death and her relationship with her stepmother, who's played by Olivia Colman, and also is that is another thing I'm upset I didn't have space to write about, because I feel that's just one of the most brilliant comedic performances, just how awful the stepmother is. She's just such a horrible person, but in such a subtle way. Yeah, and so he's asking her all of these questions. She doesn't really want to answer. She starts looking at the camera, and you get this quick shot of Boo, who's her friend who's died, and she's just sitting there in the corner shaking her head no, I don't want you to talk about this. And it's this moment where it's not just Fleabag making the decision about what she's going to share and not share. It's the hot priest asking her for some information, Boo, on the other hand, in her memory, telling her not to give that information, and she kind of has to decide what to do. And I feel it gets into this thing about sort of contemporary new media culture, the kind of visual motifs of quick editing cuts, which the show uses a lot, these kind of funny one-liners to the camera, self-deprecation, but also this kind of larger narrative ethics question over who has the power to tell a story? What does it mean to tell a story when it involves someone else's life? And do people kind of get the opportunity to dissent from a narrative that you're presenting? Mm-hmm. And in Fleabag, you see a lot of people dissenting from the narrative. Or not a lot, but it happens. And yeah, it reminds me of I don't know, when like certain things kind of have this like second life on the internet and they are taken to like picked apart and taken to mean something else, where like you know, express one version of a certain event and someone else is able to express a different version. And both of those things are kind of treated as units of media rather than like, here is the author and then this thing is separate.
Yeah. So, I want to talk about the ensemble and the other actors because I agree they're like pretty much uniformly great across the board. Let's stick with this. Let's stick with the kind of the narrative stuff. I mean, so let's say here, if you haven't been convinced to watch a show and we really haven't spoiled anything really about the show, but I think from now on there will be some spoilers about kind of twists that happen. So the big twist spoiler ending of the first season is you find out that the reason Boo ran into traffic was that she caught her best friend Fleabag making out with her boyfriend, and then she wanted to. Fleabag tells us that she wanted to just run out and get hit by a biker, so someone on a bicycle, and to get sympathy that way. But she did that. She was hit by someone on the bicycle, but caromed into the street and was hit by a truck and died.
And 2 other people died. Like, that's something that gets mentioned in the first episode and sometimes left out. But,
I forgot about that, yeah.
Just one life on her conscience. She has, like 3. She has these, like, bikers who also got hit by the car because Boo stepped out into traffic. So it's, like, a whole, you know, it is, like, a horrifying, like, series of events that she sort of set off.
Yeah, so she feels, and perhaps accurately, in some senses, is responsible for her best friend's suicide, and that guilt is weighing on her. And I think when I was watching the second season, I wondered whether the person or entity that Fleabag is talking to isn't us in the camera, but it's Boo, or some sense of Boo from another world, or just her guilty memory of Boo, and this is the one she's confiding in, because she treats the camera like a confidant, and will whisper little things like, you know, he fucked me in the ass or something, you know, just to about like, you know, a guy she sees on the street. And so it is like a friend relationship that she establishes, and then it's less so in the second season. But the first one, she's really like haunted by what happened with Boo, and I don't know if this, you know, I think I would need to rewatch with this theory in mind to see if it actually does make sense, or if there's parts where it wouldn't make sense. But it seems like one possible interpretation of the rules of this world is that she's communing with the other side, or at least thinks she's like talking. The voice in her head is like Boo's voice because that was her best friend.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's an interesting theory. I hadn't thought about that. It definitely fills the role of a like close friend who you can like say anything to with like no filter, and you can be kind of like crass and like funny. I feel like, yeah, I guess that one scene in the cafe where she is like kind of deciding what to say to the hot priest, and her indecision is kind of like embodied in a shot of Boo, might support that. I've always kind of thought of it like almost like she's like I don't know, like not a YouTuber, but someone who is like almost she's like making a show. 'Cause I feel like if she is communing with Boo, there would be more, like she spends so much time hiding her like actual emotions from like everyone, including the people in her life, but also from the audience. Like she mostly tells us like funny stuff, and occasionally like is sad, but most of it she's just trying to be like really like strong and funny and ignore all of the things that are causing her to feel a howling sense of existential dread, or she puts it in some way in the second season. But yeah, I guess if it were Boo, I think she would be more at ease. I don't know.
Well, I mean, so there's a moment in the second season. Okay, so further spoilers. She eventually does hook up with the hot priest, and there's a moment that when I was like, you know, this is like the best, you know, like TV twist I'd seen in years when it happened, which is when they're in bed together, and then Fleabag reaches out, grabs the camera, and pushes it down. And I was just like, what the fuck just happened? Even though this is just like, meta, like playing around, I was still, it was like something I'd lost. It was just like the twist level. So, because it like reconfigures what is happening here. So like, yeah, they're showing us that there is some kind of like physical reality to this, such that she can reach out, grab the camera. Like, obviously within this world, there's not a camera there. There's no camera crew documenting all this stuff. But then, and then pushes it down like, like something that would happen on a reality TV show.
Yeah, which is funny because there are also other things, presumably, that are off limits. Like, this isn't like Big Brother. We don't have like 24/7 footage of Fleabag's life that we can watch if we want it. Like, she's already making edits. She's already like, here's what's in the scope of the story I'm telling you. You have no idea what's not. And in the moment, she like draws our attention to the fact that she's like, I'm cutting. Like, this is outside. Yeah, and I feel like her and her relationship with the hot priest is kind of like the first domino that leads her to eventually like stopping, broadcasting.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little...
And this is also another large spoiler. Oh, sorry, I think it was just like laggy briefly.
Yeah, why don't you just repeat what you just said?
Oh, yeah, I feel like when she eventually, at the end of the second season, she like basically like stops broadcasting. Like, she just sort of turns and walks away from the camera and like shakes her head, basically kind of saying like, don't follow me. And that has to do with the end of her relationship with the priest. And so like that relationship is kind of one of the things that like brings her to the point of being like, I don't want to have this audience anymore. I don't want to be sort of narrating my life in this way anymore.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if someone needs to like an academic in film theory needs to like write like the ultimate article, like trying to see if there's a coherent way to explain all the stuff that happens in the like metatextual aspect of this show. At the end when she stops the camera from following her and gives a little like kind of sad wave goodbye and walks off, we think, okay, she somehow like psychologically resolved whatever pain or like fissure caused her to need this thing of talking to a camera, following her around and telling her story, and so she's going off. So we're kind of like happy. We're sad to say goodbye to this hilarious character, but we're happy that she has like kind of worked out her problems and feels like she doesn't need the crutch of sarcastically turning to the camera all the time. It when we were discussing it just now, it reminded me of something that I've only actually seen the famous part, which is the Hills. The end of the Hills, which I really didn't watch the show when it was on. It was like a mid-aughts quasi-reality show. But like, so it was a reality show about beautiful people in Southern California, and all the shots seemed framed perfectly, and it seemed kind of fakey, but people were like, oh, okay, maybe they're recreating conversations or something. And then the final shot of the show was like two of the main characters talking, and then like it zoomed back and you saw they were like on a set, like a Hollywood set, and everyone who's in like the people with the ladders and the lights and stuff are revealed as being there, and that was like a big mindfuck in 2007 or whatever for everyone who was watching.
I missed that, but that feels like part of the same like milieu as like
like what has been happening here all along. It makes you question everything. It also made me think about like early like net art.
Like I forget the name of the artist, but there was an artist who had this like project where she constantly broadcast herself on a webcam, and this was like in the 90s. Mm-hmm. So like that was another thing where it's like you think you're getting this like access to this person, but like are you? There was this pair of artists who like broadcast their location at all times, mm-hmm. and then like you kind of see that traced through to like the contemporary net where your location is traced. Not because you're like doing it for fun, but because like someone's, there's like a profit motive. But it feels like that thing where you're like, okay, who is building this reality? And if I'm entertained, does it matter if it's fake or if there are certain omissions?
Yeah, and I mean the show is never presented as anything but fiction, but It is using these kind of tropes from the reality TV world.
And it's like,
or also like, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Even within the fictional world, you're like, it's fiction, but the way it functions, the way it functions within that frame is like, very much like a reality show or like a YouTuber, like a YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or like the the American version of The Office, where Jim would always be looking at the camera, making a face, is it could be kind of seen as a predecessor to what she does by looking at the camera and like telling us what's actually happening. Okay, so the show started as a one-woman show, and Phoebe Waller-Bridge has gotten most of the press, but the supporting cast is really, really good, really funny. Olivia Colman, I didn't like know who she was before watching the first season of this, but I guess she had a long-lasting British TV comedy career, and then she blew up because she was the queen and the favorite. And,
also the best.
Right, another very like combining darkness and comedy kind of thing, and violence, because there is some violence in Fleabag, especially Fleabag like punches a couple people and. But anyway, so she's great as the stepmother, this kind of smarmy woman who is always undercutting Fleabag and treating her like the hired help and stuff. But then I think the sister does.
Cool. She's like so she seems very. Olivia Colman has like a very like sweet, beautiful face, has like a very calm energy, and she just hones in on that like quality to the point of like that's almost like psychotic, where she's like seems so gentle and she's so cruel to everyone. Like there's this amazing scene where she's painting a portrait of Fleabag and her sister Claire for a gift for a gift to their father because they're getting married.
Right. And
she's having them sit for the portrait, and she just tells Fleabag to like turn a little bit, and then she just keeps telling her to turn until she's facing away from her. And it's like clear that like she's not actually going to be like, it's the back of her head in the portrait.
Right.
And it's just so mean, but it's so funny.
And then you see it in the last episode when they have the wedding, you see the portrait there, and you see that it's just the back of her head and the front of the sister's head. This
have such a lovely thick neck.
Right. So yeah, I mean, she's like the evil stepmother character, but seems very lovely on the surface. But then like everything she says is subtly like undercutting and like psychologically messing with the other characters. So I like the sister a lot too. I wasn't familiar with that actress. I guess she's only a British actress, but she is kind of she's like the opposite of Fleabag, or at least presented that way at first. She's married, she has a stepson, she has like a high-powered career, although there's this funny part where no one in the family knows what her job is, and they think she's a lawyer, she's not a lawyer, something like that, or she...
Yeah, and that's another one of the times when Fleabag is wrong. Like, everyone at the dinner table is like, no, you're a lawyer. Fleabag looks at the camera and goes, she's a lawyer. And then, like, no, I'm not. I went to business school. I'm, like, in finance. And they're like, no, you're a lawyer. But she, like, Fleabag is also wrong about it, and she tells us the wrong thing. But she's amazing. And I feel like that is actually, like, I feel like the love story, like, obviously her affair with the Roman Catholic priest is, like, not going to end well. But the real love story of the second season is her and Claire, like, repairing their relationship. And by the end, like, there's this, like, throwaway comment that Claire makes at the wedding of the stepmother and their father. And she, like, Fleabag's urging her to go after this guy who she loves. And she's like, I would never, like, she's like, the only one I'd run through an airport for is you. And, like, if you go back to the first episode of the first season, they're, like, not close at all. Like, there's no way either one of them would run through an airport for the other. And it just kind of, like, organically happens, or not organically, but over the course of the series, they learn how to, like, take care of each other. And it's so nice. And I kind of feel like I love the hot priest storyline. It's a good storyline. But part of me is like, it's not a sad ending, because obviously it would be not a good relationship if she just, like, continued to sleep with a priest, but she kind of got her sister back. And it made me really happy because I love my sister so much. And I think sister stories are like, we don't have enough of them. And it made me so happy.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I thought their relationship was like kind of the hidden through line of the show, and then you realize it at the end that that's what like really matters, and it seems like a very like true and human relationship, and that they're often at odds, and Claire is very kind of like, I don't know, like brusque, and she'll say something that she knows is mean and that kind of thing, but they kind of like do support each other, and Fleabag helps Claire get out from under her awful husband, who is played by Brett Gelman, who is just this amazing actor who has, in the past couple of years, has shown up like 3 or 4 times in various streaming series, playing just like the dirtbag guy who is just so good at being an asshole. And so he's also in, well, he has a more of a heroic character of line in Stranger Things. But then he's also in Love, the Netflix show Love, playing the boss of the female lead, Jillian Jacobs, I think, and he's just a total asshole. And there's something. I mean, he kind of looks absurd. He has this huge beard, and he's bald. He's really tall and thin, and he's always like so outraged at the way he's being like mistreated by everyone, when really he's the one who is the true asshole, has mistreated everyone else, and he's so good at playing this one type. And maybe I think he was on Children's Hospital. It was maybe the first time I saw him, but I might be wrong about that. But I think he's kind of
like comedy.
Yeah, he comes from that like weird improv background. But yeah, so he is as Claire's husband. He's very good, and then also good, even though he only has a couple lines, is whoever plays the stepson, who has like a strange fascination with Claire that doesn't seem like sexual, just seems like he wants a mother figure or something, and he's very concerned about her. And they say the only thing
a little sexual, like he tries to get in the back with her,
right,
but
right.
It is more like calling it sexual would almost not do the depth of the obsession justice.
Right. So he likes Claire, the stepmother, much more than he likes his asshole father. And the thing he always says is "Where's Claire?"
Yeah. Yeah, and like in the I think maybe second to last episode, he like comes up to Claire and he's like, "You have to leave him," right. And like, yeah, it's so good.
Yeah, so they found like some like 14 or 16-year-old guy who's very tall and thin to play this small role as playing a weirdo, basically, and he does a good job. And then I guess the father is the last character. I feel like that guy must be a like well-known English actor, even though I didn't especially recognize him. But he also does a good job as this ineffectual guy who like gets his foot stuck in the floor of the attic right before his own wedding, and can't like everyone kind of likes him but doesn't understand why he is with the Olivia Colman character, and he seems like very gentle, and I don't know, you wonder. Sorry, say that again.
Like he can't finish a sentence. He ends every sentence. He's like, "You are my daughters, so." That's
right.
Well, that's it. And he just like goes, yeah, you get the sense that like, if he has anything to say or to express, it's like buried so deep that it's just not going to come out. It's going to maybe come out in these like partial ways, but, yeah.
Right. And then there's an absent character who is the mother, who has already passed away when the show starts, and we see her funeral and the things around her funeral in this season, but we never find out that much about her. Maybe it's because you're kind of wondering like, how did this bumbling little like kindly British man produce these two like singular daughters? Well, it must have been the mother must have been quite a character. But she's never, you never even see. There's this thing with the little bronze torso, this little like sculpture.
You see her, I guess.
Right, so you see that part of her. You see a naked like torso sculpture of her that the stepmother did, but we never like see the mother's face, as far as I know.
Yeah, and it gets passed around between all of the characters. It gets like stolen by both daughters at different points. in this show. Yeah, no, it's incredible.
Yeah, and then when they use it as the award for like the women's excellence in business or whatever, that episode is very funny as well. And Kristen Scott Thomas, is that her name? Kristen Scott Thomas.
Yeah,
she has a cameo in that episode. Okay, so I guess the last thing to talk about, which we have to talk about, and you did not mention in your piece, is the hot priest and the obsession that the hot priest created among a number of women I follow on Twitter, at least, and other maybe just regular women across the country who saw something in this guy. What is the actor's name?
Andrew Scott.
Andrew Scott. I only knew him because he was Moriarty, or still is maybe Moriarty in the Benedict Cumberbatch Sherlock series, but I wasn't familiar with him otherwise. And when that series came out, I don't think anyone was like, "Oh, hot Moriarty." Oh,
yeah. Well, his hot almost entirely in his like affect.
Okay, so he's obviously a very good actor.
Yeah, he's like violently repressed, and you're just watching. Like his face is so. I feel like Fleabag excels at casting people who like look like they're suppressing some anguish or strain, like most of the time. Like even Claire, like she always looks like tense, like she just kind of looks like she can't relax. And like, yeah, it feels like you watch him and he's like so, yeah, he's just like repressing all of his desire for Fleabag, and you can just like see the effort of it on his face, and you're kind of like, oh no. Yeah, I think the hot priest is for sure hot. I think it is a well executed romantic A plot in a TV series. I think, yeah, I think the hot priest phenomenon totally makes sense to me. I kind of don't think it's the most interesting thing about the show, though. If anything, I think it shows how good Phoebe Waller-Bridge is at like keeping her viewers like interested by giving us these like very like singular kinds of like twists on familiar plot devices. Like, of course, Fleabag at some point was going to have like a multi-episode flirtation relationship with someone, but the fact that it's like a priest and he keeps giving her like Bibles and stuff is like quite inventive and very fun. And I also like, when you're writing about a show, you end up watching every episode a zillion times, but it was like very fun to rewatch the hot priest scenes because you're like, oh, so good. They did such a good job.
Okay, so you fell under the sway of the hot priest, like many others who voiced their opinion online.
I kind of feel like one thing I will say about the hot priest is I think he initiates every romantic, like every contact. Like there's a scene where he like, she's in a confessional and he like kisses her and then they like a painting falls down and,
right.
and
he tells her to kneel.
He just threw to kneel, which
was like the moment
most
commented upon that I saw in terms of like hot priest hotness was that moment.
But she I think the Fleabag you meet in the first season has like zero impulse control and is very like sexually frank to the point of sometimes like being perhaps inconsiderate to other people. For example, the guy with the buck teeth, like her, sexual candor, I think kind of like hurts his feelings. Like he's terrible, but like at one point they're in a bar and she's like, because he doesn't want to immediately leave to like sleep together, she gets like really mad at him and then steals some money from his wallet. But with the hot priest, she doesn't initiate any of it. Like they make out, then they sleep together. He initiates both things. Mm-hmm. So I kind of feel like perhaps no one gives the hot priest enough shit for creating this like problem that has to be solved in the end by either like leaving the church or leaving Fleabag.
Yeah.
Like he got it there. So I think it's not like poor impulse control Fleabag who produced that situation. It's actually poor impulse control hot priest.
Yeah, I mean, he's not presented as, even before he has sex with one of his parishioners or the daughter of one of his parishioners, he's not presented as like the best guy. You know, he's like drinking these little gin and tonic cans and
drinking.
You know, I don't know. He's not your standard priest. I was thinking just like, you know, there's in the world of romantic comedies, but like going back to, you know, the like 18th or 19th century novel, and there was an essay that Jeffrey Eugenides wrote about this about 10 years ago in Slate, which we'll link to below. He wrote about how the traditional plot of a Jane Austen novel or something was, you know, the woman and the man are different social classes, and so there's the big barrier to them getting together, and then they reconcile it somehow. And then this evolves into being like, they're from different countries or different races or ethnicities or something, but then different religions perhaps. But then, you know, at the point now where we don't think it's a scandal if, you know, someone who is really wealthy and someone who's just a little bit wealthy gets married, like there needs to be some other impediment to what is keeping people apart, and keeping us entertained. So having having the man be a priest is perhaps one of the last remaining impediments you can put up there.
Sunny, I have a cat.
Oh, that's okay. If a cat makes a cameo appearance, that's all to the better. Okay, so
screen, finding a nice sunbeam to lie in. Yeah, exactly. Like social progress is bad for setups for rom-coms.
Right.
That, like, yeah, most of what happens in a Jane Austen novel, like, I don't know. Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, my mom read me and my sister Pride and Prejudice, and it got to the point where, like, Lydia and Wickham eloped together, and my mom like was, like, careful to kind of, like contextualize it, and she's like, this was something that was seen as, like, not socially acceptable at the time, but today it's like very normal for people to live together before they get married. But at the time, people weren't willing. And I was like, okay, like, yeah, but you wouldn't have like a relationship out of wedlock plot point. You wouldn't have the interclass plot point. So yeah, I think a priest relationship is a good way to keep that obstacle to a relationship there.
Yeah, and I think the other point that Eugenides made in this essay was, divorce was not an option for Madame Bovary or Anna Karenina, and if they could just get divorced, but still have like support, financial support from the husband, then like those stories would end differently. I'm
reading Portrait of a Lady by Henry James right now, and that's another one where you're like, oh no, like, if it were, like, just sign a prenup, like, it's okay. Like, you don't have to stay with this horrible guy, but you can't sign a prenup in 19th century Italy.
Right. Okay, so the piece you wrote, The Dirtbag Magnetism of Phoebe Waller-Bridge's Fleabag, we'll link to it in The Nation. Is there anything else you want to say about Fleabag before we move on to our second topic?
It was just really hard not to make the piece a list of my favorite things about Fleabag, but then it would be 10,000 words long and not interesting.
Okay, so if somehow you've listened to all this and you haven't watched Fleabag, go watch it because it'll still be very funny. I guess we spoiled a couple of the twists, but it'll still be very funny and entertaining. Okay, so the other piece I want to talk to you about, also in The Nation, the title is The Sopranos is the id of New Jersey. How the Garden State surreal political culture made its most famous television show. So you and I are both children of the Garden State, and I grew up. So The Sopranos is set in Essex County. Tony lives in West Caldwell. Is that right?
Yeah, he lives in West Caldwell,
which is at the far western part of Essex County. I grew up in South Orange, which is on the eastern part, bordering Newark. So Newark is one of the key points of the series as well. And then you grew up in a neighboring county, and we won't hold that against you. We'll still let you talk about Essex County and The Sopranos. So so it's the 20th anniversary of that. That's the occasion for this piece of the premiere of the show, and I think at this point everyone has had enough time to decide whether or not to watch The Sopranos. So we'll just talk about it freely. But okay, so why was New Jersey and New Jersey politics the angle you wanted to take on this?
Well, growing up in New Jersey, you gain a kind of sommelier's appreciation for stories about people behaving badly but hilariously in politics. And I think, there is a ton of New Jersey-centric writing about The Sopranos. There's Soprano Sue, who has this block of all of the locations in New Jersey that were used in The Sopranos. There are a lot of, pieces in every time someone has a bit part on The Sopranos from northern New Jersey, they get an interview in the Star Ledger.
I remember the Star Ledger used to have a weekly recap thing, and then in the final season, I feel like it was possibly on the front page or something, or at least the finale. I'm sure they had it on the front page. Yeah, it's
here's our show. We love our show, but I felt like there was a bit of a disjuncture between the New Jersey centric writing about The Sopranos and the kind of critical writing about The Sopranos. One of the pieces I found that was kind of useful was a review by Ellen Willis from 2001. So when The Sopranos was just starting, and she describes the series as a kind of postmodern Middlemarch. And then she's in the sense that you are watching the character's moral development happen against a parochial milieu. And the fact that it's a great piece, love Ellen Willis, but I wanted a piece of Sopranos criticism on the books that did not treat New Jersey as parochial. It's not parochial. There are a lot of specific kind of things about the culture of the state that inform the show and are some of the reasons why the show is so singular and wonderful. And also David Chase has talked a lot in a lot of different interviews about The Sopranos as kind of his opportunity to really just express what he wanted to do for a long time, and a lot of that came from New Jersey and from his kind of experiences there. I talked about technically 3 books in the review. One is The Soprano Sessions, which is kind of massive tome of Sopranos reviews and a long interview with David Chase. The other is Difficult Men, which is by Brett Martin, I think, but it's more kind of critical about sort of the rise of prestige TV and the role that these sort of famously demanding auteurs had. And in that book, you get this anecdote where in his original pitch to HBO, Chase describes New Jersey as one of the characters in the story. And it so is. And I just thought it would be helpful and interesting to kind of define exactly what is unique to New Jersey about the worldview of The Sopranos, and also what that worldview is and how it kind of made this kind of storytelling possible.
Right. Yeah. So it's funny to think of New Jersey as, the Midlands. Is that where Middlemarch takes place in England? I think it is, but it's not. Yeah. New Jersey is not the Midlands of America.
New Jersey is not the Midlands in literally any sense.
Right. So So the unusual things about there's a lot of unusual things about New Jersey as I remember them growing up, and that still take place. So the main one is the major economic centers are located outside the state. So New York City is the locus for most of the activity in northern or at least northeastern New Jersey, and then Philadelphia, somewhat similarly though not as strongly, in the southern part. And there's that famous quote that Benjamin Franklin said. Do you know this one? The New Jersey is like a beer barrel with a bunghole on both ends. Things are flowing outwards towards Philadelphia and New York constantly. So there's that. When I was a kid,
Franklin like that.
What's that?
I can't believe we got roasted by Ben Franklin like that.
Yeah, he was in Philadelphia. He was nearby. And then another weird so this has changed a little bit, but when I was a kid, there was no New Jersey TV news. They started this cable channel called News 12, I think, when I was in high school. But there was no the local news was the New York City news in northern New Jersey, and the channels were the New York City channels, and it's just like, so it was just kind of an afterthought in a lot of ways, and so then the identity became like, the garbage pits and the chemical factories that make the fake smells for stuff, and pollution, and like crime to some extent, but then the having the, like, I think you can note this in the piece, that like all the great mafia movies or stories are set in New York, and that's that's like the important place. And then to have, it's like it's like the varsity team or something going to New Jersey, and then there's a line in I can't remember where Johnny Sacks says this, or who says it, the guy with the Phil Leotardo. I can't remember who says it, but like one of them says, "I always thought they were just a glorified crew," talking about the Soprano crime family, and that was like, yeah, like New Jersey doesn't get no respect because the big things happen in Brooklyn, where Phil Leotardo is in charge, and we don't take those New Jersey guys seriously. So so I think that added to the comic aspect of the show from the beginning, that it was like, hey, it's in New Jersey, like, isn't that wacky? And then I don't know if you remember, but the marketing initially was very much along those lines of like, this is a wacky story. Like, he has two, like, I remember the like billboards, it would say like, this man has like one family over here, and then it was his, Carmela and the children, and another family over here, and it was the mobsters under, the Christopher and Silvio and so forth. And it was like, which one's he going to choose? Because that movie, Analyze This, had come out like a year or two before. So it was kind of like, this is just like a silly, almost like a sitcom thing. And I think they, I don't think it was ever intended to be like that, but that was the way that they chose to market it at first. It was like, this is just like a wacky thing. Okay, so what else do you think about any of that, or New Jersey and Sopranos?
One thing I would like to say is that Phil Leotardo, even though he's supposed to be in Brooklyn, the scene where he gets killed was in the Morris Plains strip mall, where like I would go like with my mom and get groceries, and also just go buy like the worst tops as a teenager. With like the hoiest shirts I could buy with $10. And that was where he gets killed. So it's, even though like, and there's this also kind of thing in the show where all the locations that are meant to be elsewhere are all in New Jersey. Like, so much of the show was shot there. The like Bates College, when Meadow, his daughter, goes to visit colleges, is actually Drew University, which is in Morris County. But yeah, I do think it felt, I mean, what mobster Brooklyn is. It has like a very established identity. It has like a very kind of culturally ingrained image. Like, it is not a place that is in question in any way. And New Jersey kind of is in question. Like, when The Sopranos came out, there weren't a ton of like shows or films or books even that really kind of like took up like Bush era New Jersey or Clinton era New Jersey as like a place of interest. But you kind of like get the sense that doesn't particularly matter to Tony Soprano, because he's like, this is comfortable. Like, I get my yard, I get my, my pool, I get my suburban lifestyle out here in the suburbs. Like, there isn't a ton of longing in him, I think, to be in the sort of traditional cultural center of the mafia, which would be like, Little Italy and Brooklyn. So, yeah, I mean, I feel like the Ellen Willis quote about The Sopranos as a postmodern Middlemarch, she's like, it's postmodern because the setting is also like in flux, in the sense that like the norms are shifting. And I think that's like something you get with New Jersey, that like the state is like, has had a lot of shit dumped on it, like figuratively and probably also literally. There's so much shit in the Meadowlands. Like in researching the piece, I found out that Barry Creek in the Meadowlands is the creek with the highest concentration of mercury in the entire U.S. But that kind of creates this like sort of instability around what the state's identity even is, and like often that means pointing to other places to define itself, pointing to other tropes. Like the cast or the characters in The Sopranos like love invoking these like mobster tropes, but doing it kind of poorly. Like they're always quoting The Godfather to each other. They're always doing like really terrible like Michael Corleone impressions. And in New Jersey, like you get that. Like if you drive around and look at just like the architecture, look at what places are supposed to represent, everything is supposed to look like it's from somewhere else, but it's like not actually from New Jersey. And I just think that's so delightful. And that makes so much more sense for a story that isn't about like people shooting each other, but someone kind of trying to gain a sense of self-knowledge and like ultimately kind of failing. But, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of the like it is a postmodern show, and one of the things that makes it so is that as you know, the characters have seen The Godfather and all those other movies. They quote them and they misquote them, and they are in some ways trying to live up to the like fictional version of the lives they themselves are living, and you know, and there's. And there's the whole plotline where Christopher is trying to, or I guess he successfully makes a horror movie called Cleaver.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So, and then the really funny scenes where they see is it Helen Mirren? Who do they mug? They mug someone and steal her like gift basket or her swag bag.
I forgot about that. Yeah, I forget who it is, but yeah, he has these weird intersections with like Hollywood and with like screenwriters, and he's like very interested in seeing himself represented, but only in this like very flattering way. Like there's this one episode where he hangs out with Jon Favreau,
right?
Which is a great episode. And Jon Favreau like kind of wants him to advise on a film, and they both want things from each other that are different than what they're saying. And I think they end up like having a falling out in the end. But yeah, I mean, there's a real like hunger to see oneself represented, but like not in certain ways. Yeah.
Now, I can't be the first person who's thought of this because it just came to me now, but, there's the Meadowlands and there's Meadow Soprano. Was that a purpose? Was that on purpose or not?
I actually hadn't thought about that.
I hadn't thought of it until right now, but it's because I remember reading somewhere that like, you had Tony and Carmela, and then they gave their daughter this very hippy-dippy kind of flower child name, Meadow, like literally, like, a field of flowers or whatever. But it's also, the Meadowlands are one of the most famous parts of New Jersey, and they're famously polluted. And they appear in the opening sequence, I'm sure, when he's coming out of the tunnel.
That's so funny, because that actually is like, it is kind of incomprehensible why the people like Tony and Carmela Soprano would name their daughter Meadow, but if it's like in their head, back of their mind because of the Meadowlands, because they were going there for a football game or something, that makes sense.
Yeah, and I just remembered one of the funniest jokes on the show is when it's late in the show and Meadow is, I guess she's thinking about going to law school, and she says something like, "Dad, don't you know that the state can crush the individual?" And Tony pauses and says, "New Jersey?" And the delivery is so good by the late great Gandolfini, and it's just such a funny idea because New Jersey is like, it's the third littlest state. It's just the joke. It's like a joke state, and the idea that New Jersey can crush the individual. But then like
But it can. I mean, like very high property taxes in New Jersey.
Oh, for sure,
we all know. Very empowered governorship, and a long, long history of corruption.
So let's talk about that a little bit more. So you talk about Chris Christie a little bit, and whether Christie saw himself as a Tony Soprano-like figure, or he would be the like sheriff who would do the bring the law to town, and
that's like the opposite of a doppelganger, because like a doppelganger is like the dark version of a character, like I mean, it's like I feel like they both kind of are characters in this tradition of these like big, blustery, like hyper masculine, but also deeply, visibly insecure, like people that is like a part of a cultural repertoire that I'm sure both of us know well and have seen, from like little league coaches to state senators. But yeah, I was just thinking about like, I mean, Christie's memoir came out around the same time, and he talks about Donald Trump, and he talks about Trump stylistically, like what, how they were both communicating on the debate stage, what kind of characters they were tapping into. And like Christie writes that like Trump was like me, but on like jet fuel. Like he was like, I was, I was doing well, but like Trump was dominating. And I just felt like, there is this thing in The Sopranos where people take tropes and like cultural ideals and harness them to their own uses, sometimes a bit naively. Like there's something that almost feels a bit naive about Tony Soprano. You're like, you're not entirely sure that he knew exactly what he was getting into when he became the mob boss, but he did still like tap into this thing, this like violent, like, domineering role that he played. And then eventually by the end, he's just like really not in good shape and might die in the final scene. And I was just thinking about like that cultural role, and then like Christie is playing a version of it. Like, and I think Donald Trump is also playing not the New Jersey version, maybe the Queens version, but they're all kind of, I don't know, like riffing on the same song. And it's like, I don't know, it makes me sad. And I guess there's also nothing inherent in like that character that keeps it from being harmful. Like, I think Christie is like obviously less harmful than Donald Trump in terms of what they've actually done in their political careers. But, yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm kind of like, it's hard to kind of draw it together neatly, but like, there is this kind of like cultural repertoire that is like funny and fun and makes like good TV and good shows, and it's awesome, and it's like New Jersey and it's where we're from. But then sometimes you see some of those tropes used out in the world to do horrible things, and you're like, oh no, like this does have consequences. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like Tony, was obviously an anti-hero, and you felt sympathy for him because he was funny and clever and was able to like outwit people, and you saw everything he went through in life, but also did horrible things and killed people, and including
Killed so many people for like not good reasons.
Yeah, I mean, like in the last season when he kills Christopher essentially to get him, because he's proving too troublesome. But and then you could see Christie and Trump as kind of versions of that figure of the the asshole, but he's on our side kind of thing. And I left New Jersey right around the time that Christie rose to power, but my mother was a public school librarian, and he made teachers one of his big enemies. And
yeah, my dad's a teacher, and it was I was in high school then actually, and I remember Christie was elected, and then the next school year, a bunch of people lost their jobs, and like the school lost funding, and it was terrible.
Yeah, and kind of the the bully's tactic of like finding a victim and just going after them is something Christie and Trump share, I would say. And in New Jersey, Christie effectively demonized teachers, and these videos would go viral of him at like town halls or something, like belittling a,
Yeah.
everyday constituent who tried to challenge him. And so, yeah, he was really took pride in his asshole persona. I wonder if, there's the one commonality between Christie and Tony is their physical commonality of being kind of fat. And then Trump is also kind of fat, but isn't a fat guy in his presentation the way that Christie is an obviously fat guy, and the late Gandolfini was as well. But that kind of he'll just bluster over you, and he'll he's just like a bowling pin, a bowling ball, just knocking over the pins or something. Is that kind of persona?
The thing I always think about with Christie is after the infamous beach incident where he shut down the beaches over the budget negotiations, and then went on the beach with his family, which I actually think is more hilarious than despicable, even though I think it's despicable, but I think it's so funny. He said something well, if you don't like it, or he's if you want to do this, then you become governor. And it just clicked that this is his mentality about holding public office, that you're going to do you're going to do whatever you want. And that's what it means to hold power. You get to do whatever you want. If someone says the beach is closed, you get to go on the beach because you have power to say, no, I get to go on the beach. And I feel obviously Tony operates that way. No one can really tell him no. And I mean, Donald Trump as well.
That's why, there can only be one mob boss. And one of the tensions in The Sopranos in the early seasons is this is who's really the boss, Uncle June or Tony. And then when Christie joined forces with Trump, it was you have these two alpha males or wannabe alpha males. Can they both live under one roof? And then it seemed Christie couldn't keep his mouth shut. I can't remember exactly why they kicked him out, but it was something along the lines of dumping
Kushner stuff. Because
so was it just that, or was there some other?
I mean, I think it was probably but Jared Kushner's had it out for Christie for forever.
Right, Christie sent Jared Kushner's father to jail
for blackmailing his own brother by setting him up with a sex worker and filming it. So unfair. So unfair that someone would go to jail for taking an action like that, a benign brotherly action.
Yeah, so that's
that was in New Jersey. New Jersey crimes have this baroque flair to them where you feel even when someone gets caught and they feel bad, you're you must have thought about how this was going to play as a story in the media before you did it. I mean, there's this fantastic example from The Sopranos where there was a county executive named James Treffinger, who's Italian, and he was very critical of the show's depiction of Italian Americans. So
that was Essex County, wasn't it? That was
Essex County, yeah. And they were trying to shoot the Pine Barrens episode in Essex County, and he came up with this bullshit reason why they couldn't, I think related to deer hunting or something. So they had to scramble and move it somewhere else. And then it later came out that he was engaged in this corruption scheme involving I don't know, campaign donations, and I think a no-show job or some kind of typical New Jersey malfeasance at the same time as he was criticizing The Sopranos for depicting Italian Americans as corrupt and criminal-minded while he was doing crimes as an Italian American. And you're even though it's hypocritical, it's something more than hypocritical. It's this highly developed sense of irony that I just really want to read into stuff like that. Yeah. There are so many.
Yeah, a baroque flair is a perfect phrase for the kind of weird, grotesque angles on some of these dirty scandals. I mean, there's the thing that got Jim McGreevey kicked out of office, which was that he was having a affair with another man who was his Homeland Security advisor or something. But it was a financial scandal as well because he was paying him off the books, something like that. And
he gave him a no-show job, I think. Yeah,
right.
Bridgegate is so much more the idea behind Bridgegate is so much more complicated than it needs to be to achieve his goal, which is rack up endorsements for Chris Christie in his re-election campaign. And you just get the sense that people have this zeal to do complicated and kind of operatic crimes with their power and with their government posts.
Right, yeah.
That is like so present in the show, and I think it's also another way that it's postmodern, that you're already thinking about like the reception or like the kind of like narrative around something while you're doing it. I mean, there's no way to confirm that. I just like can't imagine you're not thinking of yourself. You're not, I can't imagine that James Stratton didn't at any point realize that it was funny.
Yeah. Oh man. I have another New Jersey local New Jersey political scandal I'll share with you off air. But is there anything else you want to hit on Sopranos before we wrap up?
I don't think so. I mean, I guess it's just the best show ever, and I think it's really nice when, you know, people get to do the show they wanted to do. I mean, David Chase was making like the Rockford Files and like a bunch of like kind of 80s like crime shows before, and he had this like big, you know, like epic of New Jersey crimes in him the whole time, and then he got to do it, and I think that's so cool.
Yeah, I don't like. I don't know if I would put it like one or in first place or second place in the canon of, you know, the ranking of all time best like TV dramas. The Wire would be the one I would say it was competing with, but it's certainly like, no. I don't know if no one has successfully at least tried something similar. Maybe Breaking Bad a little bit, but I don't think it was not as good. And yeah, you know, certainly, you know, like Game of Thrones is more ambitious in terms of like thousands of people working on the set and all these computer graphics and everything. But like in terms of like creating these characters that could be in a novel, but are you know, vividly portrayed by actors, and the thematic deepness of it, I don't think it's been surpassed in the 20 years since it's come on the air. I mean, The Wire is really, really good, but it's basically realism. There's a couple slightly fantastical elements to it, but yeah, The Sopranos was like operating on a level I think that hasn't really been matched.
No, yeah, I mean it's a real achievement. Yeah, I guess the other thing I would like to shout out is the fact that Re New Jersey always pointing at other places to define itself. The state has so many historical theme parks for places, like for parts of history that did not happen anywhere near New Jersey, including medieval times, but notably Wild West City, a fake Wild West town where someone got shot. Like one guy who was being like they were cowboy reenactors, and then at the end of like a day they do this like fake shootout where they like walk 10 paces, turn around, like shoot the gun, and they all have all of the actors at this park full of children. I went there in 4th grade, have blanks firing guns, and this guy loaded his gun with bullets instead of with blanks. And he shot the guy in front of all these kids. Yeah, which is like something you could picture happening on The Sopranos. Like you could just see that happening where it's like this like jabroni. I think they found that he didn't do it on purpose, and that it was a mistake, and he like got his guns mixed up. But you should not have a situation where cowboy reenactors at a theme park for children can get their guns mixed up. Like that shouldn't happen.
I think you mentioned that in the article. I never been to or even heard of that place. Is it where exactly is it in New Jersey?
I honestly don't remember. It's like definitely not. It's like probably in Central Jersey somewhere where they can like get this like large
space. Yeah.
Yeah, and when I was in 8th grade, or not in 8th grade, in 4th grade, and I was probably like 8. It rained, so we stopped going outside because it was too wet. And then they had this demonstration of like whip skills inside a small room with a bunch of kids. And this man was doing like whip skills with his like son, who was holding out like pieces of paper, and like the guy like whipped right through them, and he whipped his son. by accident. He like really hurt his son. This is the kind of thing that happens in New Jersey all the time.
Okay, yeah. So there's kind of a like, yeah, it's like, you know, first history repeats itself. First is tragedy, then it's farce, and like the farce happens in New Jersey.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like the organ that processes the farces of history for the entire like nation. Just weird shit happens. Weird shit.
Right. Oh, the one last Sopranos thing I wanted to mention. This is you know, people have noted this for a long time, is that Trump is mentioned in the show very late on when AJ has a crisis of conscience late in the show about like capitalism and, you know, all the ways the earth is being despoiled. But then somehow he shakes out of it very quickly and decides what he wants to do is learn how to fly a helicopter and fly a helicopter for Donald Trump. And
yeah, it's really funny, like the throwaway references.
So just you know, whenever 2007 or whenever that was, it was like that was a punchline to that like this stupid boy's life goal was to fly Donald Trump's helicopter, and here we are today.
Donald Trump is also a very postmodern figure in that the idea that he was not an idiot and not like a reckless psychopathic playboy was invented by Mark Burnett to create The Apprentice.
I agree completely, and in fact, I've done a previous episode of the show on that very topic. Is Donald Trump a postmodern figure? Yeah, I mean, just look at the buildings that he built. Like, there's postmodernism right there, and without even you know Atlantic City. Okay, so we've got it for a while. Why don't we close things out there? So, Erin, where can people find your work if they want to follow it?
So I post everything I write on Twitter, and my handle is @WebSchwartz, like Erin Schwartz on the web, and also on my website. But I contribute pretty frequently to The Nation, so you can see it there. Do you want to see my cat? He's right over there.
Sure, why not?
Come here, Puffin. He's actually a small bear.
Oh, that's a big cat.
He's so big.
Wow.
Hello, Daddy.
This is one of the few episodes where one of my cats did not make a cameo appearance. They're off sleeping somewhere. So thank you for coming on, Erin. Thank you for giving your cat a cameo appearance. Thank you to all of our viewers and listeners, and we'll see you again next time.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was really fun.